Okay, this is lesson 109, and we're going to be multiplying decimal numbers. So before we do that, they asked a question. They said, what is 1/10 of 1/10? Okay, so I made myself a grid. There's 10 rows, so there's 1 out of 10, right? Okay, so that pink row is 1/10 of my whole square. And I want to find 1/10 of that 1/10. So if I do that, I want 1 out of these 10 pieces. So there's my 1/10 of my 1/10. So out of the whole big square, what fraction is that? It's 1 out of 100, right? So I have 100 squares, 1/10 of 1/10. So 1/10 of 100 is 10 squares. But then I want to find 1/10 of 1/10. And so that is 1/100. Oops, that should be a 10. Okay. The thing to remember with that is of means multiply. So all I'm doing here is saying that. So instead of saying 1/10 of 1/10, I'm saying 1/10 times 1/10. 1 times 1 is 1, 10 times 10 is 100. So that's how I get that answer. Okay, remember, anytime you see of, it means multiply. Okay. Then they're just telling you that you need to multiply decimal numbers. Let me make my decimals a little bit bigger so you can see them. I didn't line that up well, but keep them all lined up. Make sure that's really important. Okay, so I'm going to multiply as if I don't have any decimals. I'm just going to pretend that I don't. So 6 times 2 is 12. Carry the 1 is 7. 6 times 0 is 0. All I have to do for my decimals is count how many places are behind a decimal point. So 1, 2. And I'm going to have 1, 2 in my answer and put my decimal right in front of it. So now I have 2 decimal places in my problem and 2 decimal places in my answer. Okay? I'm going to require, even though I'm not Mrs. Snyder, but I think she'd agree with me, that you draw little lines under all the numbers that have decimal places that are behind a decimal in your problem and in your answer. Make sure that you have the same number of lines in both. It's just such a good way. Do that for this lesson. After that, you probably won't have to do it anymore. Okay, 4.2 or 4 2/10 times 3/10. So you notice that I didn't have to line up my decimals here. It's okay if they line up, but you don't have to when you're multiplying. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and underline. I've got 2 decimal places or 2 numbers behind a decimal. 3 times 2 is 6. 3 times 4 is 12. Okay, so I'm all good here. And now I'm going to count 1, 2, 1, 2. My decimal goes right in front of, so I have 2 decimal places in my problem, 2 decimal places in my answer. So it's really, really, really cinchy. When you multiply, you just kind of pretend like the decimals don't exist until you get your answer. So let's go ahead and do this one. 7 and 12/100ths, remember tenths place, hundredths place, times 3/10. Again, my decimals don't line up, but that's okay when you're multiplying. Okay, 3 times 2 is 6, 3 times 1 is 3, 3 times 7 is 21. Okay, I've got 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Put my decimal right there so I get my answer. Isn't it weird that it's kind of like fractions? You've got your 7 and 12/100ths, and you multiply by something, you get a smaller answer. Because you're saying what's a piece of that 7 and 12/100ths when you're multiplying by a fraction or a decimal. So that's why that number is smaller. I wanted to show you a little trick. So over here I had my 0. Over here I left my 0 on the front off. It's just one less thing you have to multiply. It's okay if you do that. So let's try basically the same problem without the 0 on the front. So 3 times 5 is 15. Carry the 1, 4. Okay. And how many decimal places? 1, 2. So 1, 2. There. So either way works. If I put this here, I would say 3 times 0 is 0. I'd still get that. It's probably better to do that. But if you don't, it's kind of a little bit of a shortcut. Not much. Okay, let's review a minute. So I'm going to take the same problem, and I'm going to add 7 1200ths and 3/10. So when I'm adding, you have to remember, you do have to line up your decimals. So remember, I just line up my decimals before I even put that second number in there. So 3/10 would go right there. And what do I do? Because it looks kind of funny. I fill in a 0 on the end, so I make sure that I have the same number of decimal places when I'm adding, okay, or subtracting. So 2, 4, 7. So adding, I do line up my decimal places. Subtracting, I do line up my decimal places. When I'm multiplying, I don't. It's okay if they line up naturally, but you do not have to line them up, okay? Think you got it. Let's make sure that there aren't any weird... Nope, I think you're good. So, good luck on this.